Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. So today we have a full spoiler discussion with two of my best friends about Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. Andre's got his super mega expensive copy that you can see on the other video feed. Andre is the guy who got me into reading. So Andre is basically responsible for this channel. Um,
Via the
and he
Cosmere.
also forced, yeah, via the Cosmere. Yeah, that was how I first got back into it. And Pat also has been bullied into reading the Cosmere. And we all used to do a podcast together called Gaming Fix. The guys still do it, but since becoming a dad, I have no time. So I've not really been able to get on more than like 2 episodes a year. But I knew that they loved the Cosmere, and so I was like, I know some people I can talk about Tress of the Emerald Sea spoilers with. So, what I thought we would do first is talk a little bit about our experience with the Cosmere, and then we can talk about non-spoiler impressions for the book, and then we will have a spoiler warning, and we will go full spoiler. We'll be talking about characters, and then we'll be talking about major plot elements, and then maybe at the end, Andre might give us some like Cosmere hot facts because he's the expert.
As much as I can.
Excellent. Um, I mean, I'll give you a very, very brief intro to my relationship with the Cosmere because I think I've gone over it in a video before. But basically, Andre was like, "You need to read the Cosmere. It's incredible. It's like the MCU of books." I think was how he sold me, and I had
Only
already
because that's the
read.
only way to sell Sam on anything.
Yeah, that's lucky because if you had said that to me, I would have been like, So it starts out fairly strong.
I think I
And
remember what
then-
I told what I told Pat originally.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Yeah, Sam, continue.
So yeah, I'd read The Final Empire, Mistborn when it came out in like 20. When it came out in paperback, when I was in Australia for work, I picked up a copy to read on the plane home. And I read almost all of it on the plane journey because it was a 26-hour plane journey. Yeah. And I can't sleep on planes. So I was
you
like,
couldn't really pick, you couldn't go anywhere. I don't know how many places are further apart on this globe than the UK and Australia.
Mm-hmm.
I literally think it might be. Yeah, I think
It
it's
might be
one of the longest flights you can take.
It's got to be.
And we had a stopover in Singapore. So it was like you had to fly up to Singapore and then across. It was mad. Anyway, so I read like almost all of the book. I couldn't just read consistently for the whole flight, but I read almost all of it and then finished it when I got home. But then Andre was trying to sell me on this, and weirdly, I was at the time trying to write a book, or like I was thinking about writing a book, and I started watching Brandon Sanderson's lectures, and his lecture series was like really good, and I was like, this guy might be like onto something. So I started reading the book series, and I read the first Mistborn book in like a month. I read it in like a month, and then the second book took me like 3 weeks, and then the third Mistborn book took me like 2 weeks, and then all of the Era 2 books took me like 2 or 3 days each because I was obsessively reading them like as quick as I could get through. And then I just kind of carried on. So Mistborn was my entrance into the Cosmere. And the only Cosmere book I've now not read is some of the short stories, and I've not read Elantris. I'm saving that for next year. So Andre, why don't you tell us your love of the Cosmere?
I got into it because of like I think it was an Audible ad on YouTube where like a YouTuber was talking about recommending a book that you could listen to on Audible. And I think the first one they recommended was Mistborn. I was like, oh, that sounds neat and cool. But then they started talking, another episode, they talked about Stormlight Archive. And it was just like a laser beam directly into my brain. I'm like, this is extremely my shit. I need to hear about this. I need to check this out. And so I started reading The Way of Kings. And immediately it was like a revelation and like, oh shit, hell yes. This is exactly what I'm looking for. And I believe on an episode of Gaming Fix, I was like, I have to gush about this book. And I described it as like Kingdom Hearts meets Dynasty Warriors, which I think is probably the first thing I said to Pat about it. And I consumed those books incredibly rapidly after, I read like a book a year or maybe every year or 2 books a year if I was feeling saucy. But yeah, once I fell off like in the midway through the Way of Kings, and I came back like a year later and then just consumed the rest of that series in a month, and then did Mistborn and all the other stuff, and I am caught up on everything published, and then some of the readings and stuff he's done. Um, and it hits my brain in all the right spots. There are things to criticize, of course, and not everything lands for me, but the overall concepts and world building stuff and ideas behind it really works for me. So even if there's a story where I'm not like super into it, I'm still curious about how it impacts the rest of it. So I really like that aspect of it.
And you've reread Stormlight, right?
I've
You reread
read
it when I
Stormlight
was reading
twice.
it.
Yeah, I read it when Sam read it, and I am getting excited about rereading it next year in the lead up to Stormlight 5. Like I'm actually like getting giddy about it.
I'm genuinely quite excited about doing the graphic audios. I think that's how I'll do
Mhm.
my reread.
Mhm.
But it'll depend on how it conflicts with the other stuff I'm reading at the time, because I don't want to be like, oh my god, I cannot get the Wheel of Time and Stormlight correct in my brain, sort of thing.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. All those
Um,
2,000 characters in the Wheel of Time.
yeah, exactly. So Pat, let's talk Cosmere. How did you? I mean, we all got into it via Andre.
Yeah, I am the type with most things I kind of have to start at the beginning. So I knew Sanderson had written Wheel of Time books. I never read that series. And I had, obviously heard of it before Andre got into it, but never really, I read a lot when I was in college, but that kind of fell off in my 20s. So I was down to reading maybe a book a year. And yeah, Andre was really into it. And it kind of just eventually got me there. And I started with Elantris, which I liked quite a bit. It's definitely, you know, his writing has improved as he's done it more and more in general. Which I would say with Elantris. Overall, I would not say that there is a Cosmere book that I dislike at all. I struggle a little bit with Rhythm of War because it's just so very long. But yeah, no, I'm a big fan of his work and of the books. I really like the short stories a lot. Shadows for Silence in the Forest of Hell is probably close to the top of my favorite of his stories, even though it's very short. I really like Era 2 of Mistborn. I'm not huge into the first era of Mistborn. I really like the overarching plot that occurs, but a lot of the character stuff doesn't really fit for me. The way that the places it goes are great, but and a lot of the action scenes are awesome, but there's the sort of main cast didn't hit for me like it did with Stormlight I like a lot. And then Era 2 of Mistborn I really really enjoyed as well. And I really liked Tress of the Emerald Sea too. I'm reading Yumi and the Nightmare Painter now, and then I have to finish Sunlit Man as well, but those are otherwise I'm caught up.
I think, yeah, you're almost more caught up than I am because you've read some of the more important stuff, whereas I've read all the recent stuff.
Yeah, I know I've read all of the short stories in Arcanum Unbound. So there's some that he hasn't either published, or I think there's some that have been published since then
There
that
are
are in
none
other
that have been
compilations.
published, just
Okay,
that he's done readings of.
gotcha. Yeah, I haven't listened to any of the readings. I really like Brandon. I had an opportunity to meet him last month, and he's a really, really, really kind, cool person. I like genuinely one of the nicest celebrities I've ever met. But every time gone to listen to the readings, I have a hard time. I think it's more of I have a hard time being read to more than it being a problem with the way that he reads.
I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and I just
Yeah,
listened to his most recent reading, and
yeah,
because they're live readings, he stumbles, and
that's kind of what
yeah,
I
it's
like
difficult to listen
audiobooks.
to if you're not like
Yeah, I
there and like I need to know what's going on, what he's about to say. So
would say I've consumed the Cosmere probably 50-50 audiobook to reading. I use the Whisper Sync thing between Audible and Kindle, so that's how I got through most of the books. Is I would lay in bed and read at night, and then listen to it on my commutes in and stuff. So yeah, I do like audiobooks, but listening to readings, because they are live and there's that's sometimes I have a harder time with that than just being able to read it on a page, especially with short stories where it doesn't feel like there's a huge time commitment to reading it anyway.
His delivery
for me, I just want to wait for the book. Like, I stay away from all preview chapters, all this sort of stuff. I'm like, I'm just gonna wait.
Hey, I did that for Mistborn for the Lost Metal, which was the first new, I guess Rhythm of War technically was the first new release after I started reading because it came out that year I started, but then I didn't get back to it till after it came out. So the first one that came out while I was reading the Cosmere was the Lost Metal, and
Same,
I
yeah.
didn't read any preview chapters for that. But Stormlight 5, I'm like, give it to me, whatever comes out, because like that's my series. Words of Radiance is my favorite book, and so now I'm like, okay, prepare my bank account for March and the Kickstarter, the Leatherbound. Oh God.
You're gonna be like starting Stormlight 5 on chapter 20, just like all the readings and all the preview chapters.
No, don't start it at the beginning again.
The Dragonsteel was and he does change stuff, it's not all exactly the same, but Dragonsteel, he did an interlude from Stormlight 5 to be less spoilery, but also the stuff that happened in that interlude, wild. Very excited.
Speaking of spoilers, before we switch into the full spoiler mode, my review of Tress is already on the channel, so if you want to see my opinion, it's there. What did you guys think of Tress? If you want to put a score on it, put a score on it. If you don't want to, don't feel you need to. I do it for the channel, but I didn't really think about scores until I started doing booktube.
Pat, you can go first if you like.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know that I'd put a score on it, but I liked it quite a bit. I thought it was a really nice, especially after getting off of Rhythm of War, which, again, the events of Rhythm of War, very cool. It's well written and everything. It just, the pacing of it I struggled with. And so to get into something that's a little breezier and quicker to kind of get rolling was really nice. And I think that it is a nice, like, something that I said without spoiling anything, that I said to both of you at one point was part of why it was so fun to get into the Cosmere initially is when you read like Elantris and then Mistborn and then Warbreaker and then Stormlight and then short stories, you're getting exposed to all these different concepts and settings and stuff. Like everything feels very fresh, and each new thing
novel.
You're like, yeah. And so reading the last two kind of things that I read was Era 2 and then the last couple Stormlight books. And so they're very good, but also you're dealing in very similar concepts for, in the case of Stormlight, some very long books after kind of getting a constant drip of cool new things happening. So it was cool to get back to reading something that was totally different in terms of the mechanics of how it worked. And I thought that I liked the tone. It's going to be a huge turnoff for some people, but I really enjoyed the shift in tone for the narrator having a voice, and like being a character, which is not a spoiler. I mean, that's a pretty,
it's been like chapter 3
upfront framing.
Yeah.
So I liked it quite a bit. It's definitely higher on my list than I was expecting going in. And because I sort of, based on what I had heard about it, I assumed I wouldn't be as into it as some of his other work, but it surprised me, and I really like that. We'll talk about it when we talk about spoilers, but I really like the places it goes. I think that the directions it goes in are really cool.
All right. Yeah. I am a little bit softer on it, mostly because of the tone and the voice that he uses. It's very storybook, and I don't have any like nostalgia really for things like The Princess Bride, or like much nostalgia for like old Disney stuff, that kind of fairy tale whatnot. And that's not to say it's bad. It's not a judgment call. It's just not really for me. But because of that framing and who's using the voice and their role in the Cosmere and what I know about the Cosmere going forward, it did kind of worry me a bit. Like, oh, if this is how like parts of Mistborn are going to end up or something with like this kind of narration, I don't know. Even though those are multiple point of view books. But so it was giving me a little bit of pause. But mainly the first few chapters, like kind of up until Tress gets off the island, and then it kind of gets to a better place, I think, tone wise and narration. But it is like a much sillier book than uh, like anything else in the Cosmere. It is the silliest and most whimsical of the Cosmere tales, which totally has its place. I don't think like he shouldn't have written it or anything. I don't think it's bad, but it is not one of my favorites. But I do think there's a lot of really fun stuff and interesting things to see in it. I'm glad I read it.
Yeah, I think for me, I also, like Pat, didn't think I was going to like it or didn't think I was going to love it because I traditionally don't enjoy satire or comedy fantasy. I kind of like it to be a bit serious, but with the odd joke. Like that's why I think the Mistborn Era 2 works well for me in that there's a
You like
comedy
Batman and
comic
Spider-Man,
character.
and that's
Yeah, exactly. Like it all makes sense. Um, let's shift into spoilers now while
sure.
we're here. So, shifting to spoilers now for Press of the Emerald Sea. I'm holding this book up because this will remind me to cut here and put a spoiler warning across the screen. So that's how I
Also hold
cheat
a
in
book
all my
up.
videos. When you see me go like, and then I'm talking about this cover, that the me pointing is me telling me in the editing to put a cover there.
Wow, spoilers for the
So
YouTube channel.
yeah, there's so many. I make this channel incredibly jankily, with like a hodgepodge of equipment, and it works out quite well. But I'd love to do a like behind the scenes one day. So let's talk about Glorf. Um, Glorf of the Emerald Sea. Uh, I thought that was incredible. Like that when that was on the front page. And they were like, "Oh, her name was Glorf." I was like, "Okay, I'm interested now." Like, this is very funny. Like straight away, dumb funny. Let's talk about Tress.
Tress effects,
Uh,
NVIDIA Tress effects.
we're in the spoiler zone now, everyone. So, I think Tress isn't such a good main character. Really liked her. I like how I talked about this in my review. But Hoyd often will be like, and because Tress wasn't your standard protagonist, she just sat and thought about it and things like that. And I was like, yeah, this is actually genius. Because you often read a book and you're like, why isn't Kaladin just like talking to this person? But then like Tress is like, I'm going to go talk to him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That the like while I didn't necessarily love all those like interjections and the way the story was told, in that way, with the narration, that stuff is very good. How she's just like, I'm gonna sit here and think about this. I'm not gonna rush into anything. It was very effective.
Oh, I forgot to mention, this is only going to be spoilers for Tress. If we do at the end when we want to talk Cosmere connections, want to spoil anything else, we'll specifically flag it.
Okay.
But I don't think that there's much else to spoil.
Well,
I mean,
yeah, I mean,
the end of the book, and
the end of the book,
like part 5 onward.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there for sure. I don't know that it would be spoilers for any other books, though.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
There's a lot
like,
of connections that happen later on in the story, but I don't know that they would
Capital C
necessarily.
connection.
Yeah. Literal device object with which one connects themselves to various planets. But yeah, no, I will say, I think one of my few real critiques of the story is I thought it was great that they started off with Tress as being like unassuming and being like incredibly normal, et cetera, et cetera. And I was interested to kind of see where that goes. But then it's still, she's as normal as any protagonist is in any of the Cosmere books before something happens that makes them no longer normal. Like I was half expecting it to maintain that, like, she was not the main character. Like she's the main character. She's the point of view character, but not necessarily.
She's not the main character of the adventure.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking maybe that's where it would go given the framing.
I mean,
but she is very much.
You could say Hoyt is the main character of the adventure, and he's just stuck in a stupid body.
Yeah, but she definitely ends up becoming an extraordinary person by the end of the story. But that's fine. It's not a huge deal. I just don't think that, in hindsight, I don't think that beginning, felt like he went out of his way to be like, no, she's really normal. When it's kind of like, well, you could say that about.
She is very, very outgoing, and she has a lot of do anything for the person she loves, no matter how dangerous and ill-advised it may be. Overcome all of her fear for that. So how do you guys feel about that romance between Tress and Charlie?
Well, I thought it was good. I am not usually a huge. I can take or leave when romance is at the center of a story. I mean, that's not really I think probably part of why I like the Cosmere is that it's not necessarily. It doesn't necessarily center the romantic relationships.
Romance adjacent.
Yeah, well, like, I mean, there are strong romantic relationships. I mean, Warbreaker is very much a love story.
Oathbringer has love triangle, and
yeah, it's not like he doesn't touch on those things, but I feel like they don't become the focus of the characters in a way that they often do in other fantasy stories, and that I can kind of find that I tend to find frustrating sometimes. Other fantasy stories that are, because I don't know, it's a big topic, but but I prefer the sort of more Lord of the Rings approach that Sanderson takes, where there are love stories that are very important to characters' development, but they're not. They feel like they're there for character development and to move the story, not to move copies of the book, which I appreciate. And in that way,
I feel like Tress is like that as well, though.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think so too. I think it's good.
I like Charlie a lot, and I think he's the like unspoken, like that he knows that she knows that she knows that he knows, like silliness of their relationship at the beginning is really funny. I really liked how I know you're saying like, oh, that she's not a normal girl or whatever, and I think that Hoy specifically calls that out because he's like, oh, because all the other girls are like, oh, we're not like other girls, and Tress actually thinks that she is normal, whereas all of them think they're special, which is what makes her special.
Right.
And I thought that I really like that she doesn't have any innate magic, like that she's not magical, because that's not something we really see in Sanderson. Almost like Andre and I were talking about it, and I was like, is she basically the only main protagonist that doesn't have any super abilities? And like it's only
there's
the Warbreaker,
the
girl in Warbreaker, isn't it?
And Warbreaker,
the woman,
and then also
Elantris is
yeah, Yeah.
So there are a few
and short
here and there,
stories
but
too.
Yeah,
There are short
Yeah.
stories where the characters aren't magical.
But,
But definitely compared to like Mistborn and
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Stormlight. Stormlight is arguable too because they're not magical.
I mean, yeah, like they start
Until
off without
they get
powers,
their magic,
and then
you know,
they,
like
and then they get the
yeah.
powers. But yeah,
But it's true that I think what to your point though, in all of those stories, things tend to happen to characters
Mhm.
to push them into their roles.
Mm.
And I feel like Tress is more actively making choices to push
Yes.
to bring herself towards
Yeah.
the way that she interacts with the magic of that planet.
She has a lot more
Yeah.
agency in this story
Yes,
than
yes,
any
which is
character in any of the other books.
which is not to say that it's bad the way that other characters are sort of thrust into
Oh,
things in other books, but I did think it was a nice it was a nice difference that Tress was actually, and I liked that her family, like there was no cliche like, oh, she has to sneak away in the night. It was just like her parents were like, no, you I guess you got to go do this and stuff. That was very refreshing. And I really loved the bit about her dad and how everyone how he was the wealthiest man on the island and stuff because people loved him, and he just did things for people, and so he had worked up so many favors over the years to get back and stuff. That was very cool.
Yeah,
I thought that was touching and effective.
I think Tress is cool with her magic stuff as well because she's one of the only magical characters that isn't defined by her magic. Because you feel like you would often describe other characters, so be like, oh, Vin is a Mistborn, Wax is whatever the name of his twinborn is. Like, what's his name? What's the name? Andre will remember it eventually.
Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Forget.
And like, you know, you'd be like, oh, well, Kaladin is a windrunner, you know, whereas like Tress is a girl who
I mean,
does
she's a
this
spore
thing.
tender or whatever,
Sprouter,
but like
yeah.
Anybody could
but
theoretically be a sport
But
tender if they're
and also
fearless enough.
she could stop too is another
Yes.
interesting thing about it. Is like in
Kaladin
other
could stop too if he'd just be willing to murder.
I was just gonna say in the other in other magic users, their magic is Sanderson's magic system
genetic
is
almost.
always, well, it's beyond that even. It's almost always a burden in some way. I mean, like Kaladin wouldn't say that being a windrunner is a burden, I don't think, because he loves Syl, but it is still. I mean, he's responsible for her well-being, and you know, as a Mistborn, you can't really. I mean, you could hide it, I guess, and not ever ingest metals, but you're always going to be that thing. You're always going to know you're that thing. And so I think it's interesting that in the case of a Sprouter or in Tress's case, she could just stop. She could just no longer use spores for anything, and it would be fine. There wouldn't be any like negative repercussions for that.
Yeah, it is a very different existence for Tress than basically any other character in the Cosmere, which is fun.
Wax is a crasher, by the way.
Really?
I don't remember.
Yeah,
them
they're
ever
called
saying
crashers.
I don't think they ever. I don't remember them ever saying that. I believe you because you're looking at it, but
yeah,
I don't think I remember ever hearing that. And I really liked the whole thing, that world's whole thing, and it feeling like he doesn't often do like the world, the planet itself, or you know, the landscape itself is usually kind of whatever.
Sure.
And Roshar, of course, has its stuff.
But it's also just like landmass, and you know, exactly.
And so I think that the making the Spore Sea and everything is a really cool thing conceptually, and it is encouraging to me that he's thinking in those terms when he's coming up with ideas, because it shows that like clearly he has a lot of world building ideas that are still rich and out there and different.
And in the secret projects, like, we see a lot more of those ideas, which I think is a lot of fun. Yumi,
I'm only a little bit
still,
into Yumi, but it's
got weird stuff going on.
It's night and day stuff, and it's clear that like that there's cool stuff going on there too. So it's nice to see that.
Sunlit Man
change.
Also has some very cool,
I'm sure,
stuff going on. So
I think the world building in all 3 books is like really on point, and he's tried to make interesting and different worlds in the same way that he did with Stormlight, where like a lot of his early books are like, this is a fantasy world, but whereas Stormlight is like, there are crab people and like giant rocks.
And I like the way that he's very good at coming up with these concepts for strange geography and physics and like rules of nature, and then showing how people cope with those things and deal with them. And so I think that that's very interesting in Tress. It's the classic thing of like, I say I want new and different things with every book, but also I sure would like to read maybe one more book with Tress. Like, like one, now that she's like achieved her initial quest, I'd love to see something else, or not even her necessarily, but something on that planet.
I mean, there is a lot. There's weird stuff going on that planet, and from a Cosmere perspective, there is very weird stuff going on that planet, and but it's also like a complete backwater, and like not really of any importance, basically, is what Hoyd makes it sound like. Like, this planet doesn't matter.
I know,
like,
which is funny because
it's such
it certainly seems to matter to 2 very important beings that are not from there.
But it's really weird what's going on there. But so we've talked a lot about Tress and specifically like the island at the start, but what about, I mean, so much of this book takes place on a pirate ship, with a whole crew of pirates and stuff.
For some reason, I wasn't expecting that either. I don't know why I wasn't expecting it, because it's called Tress of the Emerald Sea, but I was not expecting to see like a pirate adventure at all.
You could, I mean, it's kind of like a little Wizard of Ozzy in that way. Not like wandering down a road, but you had, this motley crew of characters coming together, and
he cites the Princess Bride as being like his chief inspiration for the book. I got more Peter Pan out of it than Princess Bride, partly with the pirates thing, I guess, and the nasty pirate captain.
I mean, it's lots of those things like might not have even actively been thinking about them, but of course they're gonna bleed into ideas about this kind of stuff.
But I love the mechanics of like how their cannons work and how the guns work and stuff like that.
Spores into it and whatnot.
I think that's very clever and very cool, and the fact that like the water is instead of combustion, it is the violent growth of spores,
kinetic expansion.
It's super cool. And I like the cast of characters quite a lot too. Crow started to tip over into, I don't like stories where villains feel like comically evil. That's one of my struggles at times with some of the other stories. Less Mistborn, but definitely in Stormlight. Some of the fused particularly in Rhythm of War, I was just like, you are such an awful, awful, awful person. And it takes me out of it a little bit, because I'm like, there's just no way a person this awful could exist.
You just need the cartoonishly and maybe that's evil villain representation.
Meeting
his quota.
I just don't click with that stuff as much, unless the story that's they're contained in is as absurd. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of it out there, but like, I can deal with like Homelander in The Boys, because he is comically, stupidly, like hilariously evil, but that's all. The show is also stupid and goofy, and like that's part of the point. Tonally, it kind of fits. And Crow started to tip for a story that felt more whimsical. Crow did start to tip into just being a vile sack of shit too far. But then, right as I was about to put the book down and message you guys and say, I don't think I can deal with how much of a like cartoon villain Crow is. That's when she gets hers. So like I like it was literally the chapter before she loses. So then I was like, all right, well, he like tipped it a little far, but then since she immediately gets owned, I guess literally, I was like, okay, it's fine. I can put up with this. I can deal with it if, and then, you know, all the nasty stuff she does kind of gets reversed in a way. So yeah.
I also like that she was dealt with in a like non-violent way.
Yes.
And a non-magical way as well, and in a way that actually probably was the best outcome for her.
And very clever. It was very clever. That whole sequence is very good. I don't know if we want to all go all into there.
I laughed a
lot. From the beginning, it felt very storybook. Like the opening of the story felt like, oh, on a rock there lived a girl or whatever, and like that felt very storybook. And then that kind of went away. And then that sequence, with this what's his name?
This, I think,
is this Refliel or something? Yeah, this.
Oh,
there's a full name on the Coppermine, but yeah. So with the dragon, that would like once again felt very storybook in the representation. Oh, she's just going to talk her way out of this encounter with the dragon, which I think works. It didn't need to be a big battle or anything. She didn't need to, try to outsmart and use all the spores around her to do something or whatever.
Is that the first time we've seen an adult dragon?
That's the first time we've seen a dragon in the Cosmere, isn't it?
Well, I mean,
a dragon as a dragon.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting. Because in Dawn Shard,
seen other dragons, but not in their dragon form.
Yeah, and in Dawn Shard, there's a dragon whelp, right? Like
that's not a dragon.
Really?
No, they're
they're
those are just like big weird Roshar birds.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was interesting. It was cool too to see like he slipped in the like calling it dragon steel, the scale armor that they have.
Yeah, I thought that was cool.
That was cool. I thought that was a clever little like Leonardo DiCaprio pointing at the screen moment.
That's the name on the side of the book.
We put the thing. They said the thing in the thing.
Yeah.
That was cool. It was a very cool. I'm glad that he's going with a sort of semi-traditional portrayal of dragons.
Sure.
Because I think that is a fantasy. Well, I mean, like that, the way that dragon is portrayed and seems to behave is like, yes, there's the like they don't hoard treasure, they hoard knowledge piece. That's, I guess, sort of different. But like that dragon could be a dragon in a Tolkien story or in a D&D campaign or something. Like dragons, I like when dragons are not inherently evil, but they're very intelligent and scheming and often end up doing things that we would think of as bad because they're so smart that they kind of tower above people intellectually and don't really have regard for
limited by
lives
mortal
or whatever
ideas of good and evil.
Yeah. I think that's cool, and that is it's maybe not traditional, but it's definitely in line with a lot of like concepts from things like D&D and stuff like that. And so I think it's cool that that's his approach to dragons, and that he didn't, because he often does, and I like it usually. He often does pretty out there stuff for his storytelling concepts.
I mean, Tress, like as an example, like the stuff going on that planet is really out there.
But I think it's cool that sometimes he reins it in a little bit and does something that's a little more traditional, and the way that dragon, I'm excited to see more dragons and understand more about like what they're doing and why they are the different places that they're at and stuff. And like I was starting to get, and I know, Sam, you've said this before, I was starting to get a little fatigued is maybe the wrong word, but the Lost Metal has so much stuff going on with interconnectedness of different stuff in the Cosmere, and it felt almost like a chore to me because I was like not in a place where I felt okay going on Coppermind, and I just was like, how many different things are we going to, how many different references are we going to cram in here? Like, there's so much stuff happening that I feel like I have to either ask Andre about or try to strategically look up to understand what I'm looking at. And aside from like double checking that Ulam is a Khandra in Tress, it was like that. And then the other connections were things that are less like, oh, fuck, I don't remember what this side. Don't know if we're allowed to swear on your channel, Sam. I apologize. You
That's
can
fine.
bleep me right there if you need to. I was sort of going, oh, crap. I have to look all this stuff up. I was more like, I'm interested to see more of what this is in the future.
Yeah,
It felt more like
I got
probably
the same
the
thing.
thing I'll have to look up.
There's
remember what happened in Tress later on.
Yeah.
But still, it was cool.
Well, and we get like with Fort and his little tablet thing is a neat like peek at the future of technology in the Cosmere, because it's an awakened.
They say it's Nalthian as well.
Yeah.
So I'm like,
it's awakened.
So
And we get even more of that through the secret projects, and we hear more about it. But like,
I just
they use breath to create computers, which is like super cool to see. And the way, so you're getting hints of, this is kind of getting into Cosmere aware spoilers, but you start to see, because this takes place, we don't know exactly where in the timeline, but like beyond where we're currently at, with like Stormlight and Mistborn. And so you start to see like, okay, here's like how they can use the magic to do other interesting things beyond what we've seen. Then I like how it has that Wizard of Oz moment where the dragon gives Tress like, okay, here's stuff for your friends, like here's some glasses for Anne. Here's here's a better,
that was very cute.
Here's the iPad Air 6 for Fort. And all that stuff.
I saw a great review that was from a guy who works with deaf children, and he was like, "Yeah, I work with deaf kids, and these tablets exist, but the autocorrect isn't as good." And he was like, "So obviously, a magic tablet is better than what we currently have." But he was like, "This is what actually is probably the future for a lot of deaf people, is something like this." And I was like, "Wow, I'd never even knew about that." And apparently Brandon did a lot of research on it. To like accurately represent.
Yeah. It seemed Fort is a really good character. Actually, maybe
he's my favorite character. I think.
Yeah, I think he's my favorite too.
Well, actually, Ulam's my favorite character in Tress.
I mean, Ulam is a great character.
I want to get your eyes.
When he just randomly has extra fingers one day. Like,
I don't hate him in like. I don't hate that guy in the context of like, he's a good character. But if you were to introduce me to him, I would be like, stay away from me.
I mean, well, yeah, of course.
Like you.
I mean, he's like that 30 Rock bit with the homeless man going, "Give me your fingernails."
Yes.
Less
really like
when
he's like
outside CVS.
He says to saying to Tress, and he's like, "Oh, you only need one kidney," and he's like, and she goes, "How many do you have?" And he's like, "Touche."
That Ulam is a good character. I'm not sure what there's a line that Hoyd says about Ulam being dead, and I don't know what to make of that, because like I don't think Khandra count as dead, but so like I'm not sure if there's like a weird thing going on with Ulam as a Khandra, or if he's just like, or Hoyd is just being weird about Khandra in general. So that's like a fun little like, what's going on over on Mistborn on what's it called? I forget.
My favorite. I think my favorite. It's not an Ulam thing, but my favorite. Not probably passage, but the funniest passage, the thing that made me laugh the most, was when they encounter rain, and it's like, I haven't explained rain. The more meteorologically inclined among you might be wondering about the planet's weather patterns and water cycle. If you're one of those who these things are extremely important, you have my sympathies. It's never too late to develop a personality.
Is that a direct knock at Brandon for his fluidization discussion earlier in the book?
I think he is picking on himself in a meta way there because he's
Yeah.
into all that kind of
Yeah.
minutia about
I mean,
the way the world
He's calling
and
you out,
worlds work.
Andre, about investiture.
hey,
Yeah,
no, investiture is
it's-
important. It's interesting.
It's that line is so that sequences or whatever is so
very
funny.
It's not my fault.
The
You
fact
can't
that he
understand
comes
what a
back to
dawn
it
shard
later.
is.
That's true.
Nobody knows what a dawn shard is.
I know what it is. We know
Pat,
what it is.
I don't know if I can't remember if I told you, but Sam once again came to me saying, "I don't know what a dawn shard is."
Oh my god.
How many
dawn shard
times
is
do
a
we have to
gun.
teach you this lesson, old man?
It's an idea. It's like a USB flash drive that goes in your brain.
Yeah.
But it's also a gun.
It's okay. Did you play
Well,
Cyberpunk
but anything's a gun
2077?
if you-
It's the biochip.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
Johnny
that's it.
Silverhand
That's it. That's
in your
a really
head
good-
telling you to kill.
Yeah.
You got to take
Corpos.
down. Yeah, got to kill corpos. So we've talked about a lot of stuff up to it, and then we kind of once like chat part 6. Is that what it is? Part 6 is like the end of the book,
6, yeah.
and where you kind of get the big reveals and find out like,
Yeah,
it was what the journey was the whole time, and
I had been expecting the sorceress to end up being like Hoyd, basically, like not a shard bearer, but someone who was from another planet and stuff.
Yeah.
And I hadn't considered that with the dragon for whatever reason. I don't know why. I actually assumed there wouldn't. I thought he was going to go full Wizard of Oz, and there wasn't actually going to be a dragon.
I thought it was just going to be a guy.
Yeah. But with the sorceress, I assumed that she was going to be like Hoyd, but I was not prepared for her to also just be like.
This is when we start getting into other Cosmere stuff. Yeah, she is an Elantrian. I think maybe one we know. Let me double check. Maybe
I got that vibe, but I couldn't remember.
Rena is her name.
She shows up maybe in Secret History. Yeah, she does show up in Secret History. Interestingly.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I remember seeing something from Brandon where he was like, yeah, she's one of these in Mistborn Secret History.
Yeah. I was not expecting her to just basically have like a rocket ship.
Yeah.
that
was like I thought she'd just like open up a portal and step into Shadesmaw or something.
So I realized it was a
rocket ship.
As soon as they got there and it was like they were describing the tower, I was like, oh, that's a spaceship. That thing is a spaceship. But
they're describing it as phallic, aren't they? Like, isn't that the joke? They're like, it looks like a dick.
Yes, there is a direct.
One
of the most lewd jokes that Hoyd has made, where he refers to it as it just being a penis.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought that was super cool. I love that she just has a computer in there, just a straight up MacBook that she's typing on. I wonder if she can get Wi-Fi in there. Like, what is she? Can she?
She just has to use connection, capital C connection, and she can connect to any.
I guess,
in the world or something. I don't know, That stuff
I like
is
the
Just
reveal.
keeping a secret diary.
I hadn't figured out the Huck being Charlie thing. That was that actually caught me.
I thought Huck was Hoyd the whole time.
Like Hoyd got his brain switched with a rat, and that's why his fast
that would have been
so bad.
That would have been funny. No,
I clocked the Huck thing pretty early. Like it was like talking rat. I was immediately suspicious. I'm like, Huck, that's okay. And I can see how like, okay, Charlie, Chuck, Huck. I could see that line.
They explain that. Yeah. I didn't once they made that connection. I was like, oh, of course. I don't know why I didn't see this earlier, but I didn't pick up on it earlier. And I thought it was good. I really liked those weird midnight spore monsters. Those things very cool.
Very similar to some of the stuff in Stormlight. Like
it just reminded me of Yumi.
Sure, yeah, that too. I mean, there's a lot of stuff like that. Midnight Essence.
I read Tress and then read Yumi straight away and was like, more blobs.
Yeah.
I'm excited to if you say there's more blobs in Yumi, that just makes me want to continue reading it more. I love a good blob.
But because everything on the Tress planet is more aether based than shard based. The separate magic systems and separate ways of doing things and whatnot. It is an interesting like joining point or like similarity between those two systems.
Yeah, the fact that
That
there was
exists
like
between even different shards
and the fact that
whatnot.
she was like using the breath and light weaving
Yep.
and all those different types of using different types of magic. I thought it was very cool.
Yeah.
And it was very like I want to read. I'm excited for him to write something that is a character, doesn't have to be Hoyd, but one of those characters going from planet to planet, sort of in the way it happens in Secret History, but a little bit more like I want to watch someone travel through these different places that we've been already and see how they interact with the different systems on each planet as they go.
Yeah, because Hoyd does a lot of that in Stormlight, but he does it off screen, like
exactly.
when he
Yes.
bonds design
Yes.
and stuff.
Yeah. I don't think this is too much of a spoiler, but like you're getting part of that story in Sunlit Man for someone.
Yeah.
Like
yeah,
who
for
is
sure. Which
you're
is
getting
cool.
someone who is a world hopper, and you are getting them on a new planet.
Yep, that's cool. I figured that's what it's about. Yeah. I would love it if he did like. I mean, he's got plenty of stuff that he's writing, but I would love it if he did like another short story compilation, but it was the short stories were
and stuff.
Things that Hoyd or some world hopper was doing, going from place to place.
There's so many of them now.
I know. Yeah. Because I also don't have a good sense of like what their lives are actually like,
Sure. Should we?
And I find that interesting.
Should we move into Cosmere?
Yeah, I think, and that's a good place to kind of finish up at least, with the ending portion where now Hoyd is even more powerful because he has the powers of an Elantrian, which are some of the most powerful in the Cosmere.
And he's apparently been trying to get that for a while.
Yes, since the first book,
since Elantris.
Yes, that he shows up in that book very briefly, and you don't know what he's doing, but he's like, he's there in the story, and
it's not a spoiler for the story, but or for the book, but the stuff that happens. I won't say specifically what it is, but the stuff that happens in the epilogue for that book with Hoyd in it is definitely one of the early things that I was like, clearly this is going to go some crazy places because it's not even a particularly revealing or long sequence, but it just was like very like he was clearly thinking about very long-term ideas when he first wrote this book, which was very exciting to me because Hoyd is definitely. I wonder if there's going to be a point at which Hoyd shifts to a more antagonistic character.
That's definitely a theory people have,
and not necessarily because I think he's
like
actually.
Go ahead.
I don't think it's because I think he's a bad guy naturally, but I wonder if he will hit a point where he's seen so much and can do so much that he's kind of like, wait a minute.
He has his own designs on what's going on.
Yeah,
and,
literally.
And he wants things to, he has an idea of what he should be doing, where he should go, and all that kind of stuff. And, is that going to be at odds with the characters we like? And who is he going to be? He's going to be playing people off each other. He, who knows what his end game is? There are, plenty of thoughts and opinions and ideas, but he is an enigma still, even though we've been seeing him more and more. I think he's supposed to be a character, one of the main characters in Mistborn Era 3, but it might be Era 4. He's one of the main characters for one of the Mistborn eras.
I mean, Sanderson generally seems to be gearing up for sure to have him be a more front and center main character. I mean, he says as much in the afterword for Tress. He talks about how part of the impetus for writing the book is that he's practicing Hoyd's voice. Yeah. which I think was pretty successful here. I would hope that, like you guys are saying, I don't want to read a Mistborn book with this tone,
Yes.
or a Stormlight book with this tone. So I hope that he continues to kind of hone that a little bit. But yeah, I was pleased with the ending of the story. I think it was good that it's just kind of like people living happily ever after. I do, I d- I did. I think it's good that it worked out that she was with Charlie. I think it would have been interesting if by the end she had actually kind of been like,
I've
wait a
changed too
minute,
much, sort of
I've
thing.
changed enough over this that I think I maybe am over you.
Yeah.
I think that could have been interesting, but it's fine the way it is too. And clearly, there's a little bit of he and his wife in those
Yeah.
characters. So
he wrote
obviously
it for his wife, and
Yeah,
he
yeah.
wanted to write her a nice little romance story.
Yes,
She's
so
like,
it's
"Why
fine.
is there no
It's
romance
not a
in your books?"
criticism, but I think it would have been cool too to see her kind of grow out of that.
But also like their relationship is such that like neither one is like holding the other back. Like they're holding themselves back from being in the
No, they do.
relationship.
It's good.
and stuff,
It's
so
good for sure.
they're just
It's good. I
he
think the way it
keeps
ended was good.
he keeps keep going, or he gets to start going, I love my strong wife.
Yeah, exactly. I really liked too that they just totally, the villains of the story just get absolutely
Oh yeah.
screwed
Just
over.
it is a much cleaner victory, and
Yes,
like
I appreciate
happier
that now and
ending
then.
than like his other books. We were saying, Tress is a lot more has a lot more agency and all that kind of stuff, and compared to his other books, this is just a much cleaner ending. There's no like,
I
oh
think like
well, we lost this person and that person. No, the bad people got messed up and everybody got away happy.
when nobody really died. I mean, there was that one guy,
Yeah.
but
A random
I
Doug or
like,
something.
yeah,
I guess there was like a whole
the
ship of like sailors that does
yeah.
get
I mean, those people
wrecked,
died.
but
Yeah, I think that one of the things early on that I came to really like about Sanderson is that he is subversive as a fantasy writer. Like a lot of times, look, I mean, if I won't spoil the whole of Mistborn Era One, but I mean that is a very subversive arc. Like who the hero ends up being in the end and stuff is it's very different and interesting. And it's part of why, without spoiling the end of Mistborn Era 2, I was very disappointed with the end of Era 2, even though I love Era 2 overall, because I felt like it was just the most cliche crap that he could have possibly come up with.
Sure. But I mean, in a way, that's how I felt about Tress. Not necessarily in a bad way, but that I felt it was it was a return to like cliche or like storybook stuff. Like
and
I said,
I kind of liked it.
Yeah.
It's fantasy stories have gotten so bleak.
Yes.
That having a happy ending is almost more subversive.
Yes.
Where everyone lives happily ever after.
When you're
than
coming off,
had there been some great twist where Tress had died or something.
Yes, when you're coming off Rhythm of War like you just did, then going into Tress's. Yeah, a very
Rhythm
welcome
of War
change of
is
pace,
bleak
like you
in
said.
different ways.
Yes,
I don't think Rhythm of War is cliche.
No, but it is very bleak and dark and depressing.
Yes, definitely. And it's not to say that I think that the ending of Mistborn Era 2 is conveyed or written poorly either. When I say crap, I mostly mean certain things that happen at the end. I was just like reading it like, come on, man, say psych. What are you doing? And I was like, not just annoyed because of things, because I didn't like the thing that happened to a character I like. It's also just like, this isn't
narratively, like, it's unsatisfying.
I could go get this anywhere, Brandon. I could get this ending at any. You're better than this, man. That's kind of where I came away from with it. And I liked it, but I liked that kind of cliche happy ending here. I thought
the other Cosmere aware stuff early in the book, when I first listened to the preview chapters that he did as part of the Kickstarter, I got very excited because he mentions the Irali, who live on Roshar, but are also like a Cosmere wide people. It's like, oh, this is like an old Irali cup, and they're gone. We don't know where they are. They used to be here, and like the Irali part of their deal is they're supposed to like go on like 7 pilgrimages or something to different planets, and then like I think like the final pilgrimage will take them to like their like return them to their homeland or take them to like the promised land kind of thing, where they'll live. And we're getting more of them in the Cosmere, and they seem like they're going to be more and more important. Like the Lost Metal, they show up as a big threat, and like that was
Mm.
very interesting. They're present on Roshar, and around and doing stuff. We see them, and so that was a very big, like a nice little Easter egg of like, ooh, there's something to look forward to here. Like, what's going on with them? They're around, and that's also kind of when we get the feeling that Hoyt is telling this story to someone on Roshar.
Mm.
We don't ever find out who, which infuriates me. I really want to know the context in which he's telling Tress and
Or so a
Yumi.
Rosharan, maybe he's telling that story.
He's telling the story to someone on Roshar, and it seems like he's telling it to a Rosharan, because like there are comments he makes like, "Oh, you don't have this here" or something, and like the rain
Yeah.
comment too was like, like it doesn't just come in a big rainstorm. Like there are, there are rain clouds and whatnot, and
I
the
can't
water
remember
cycle.
now.
But
There was something particular near the end of the book that I can't remember now, where he's like something on your world,
mhm.
and it was like he referenced like movies or something.
Maybe let me pull it
I
up.
can't remember what it was. He
Yeah.
was something about like just going to the movies or something like that.
Mm. Let's see if I can pull it up. But
Yeah, I'm seeing if I can find. No,
He does
doesn't just
reference
say
vending
lady.
machines.
he does.
Yeah, and
You
I
sure
was
that's
like,
not in
this...
Yumi?
no, he
No,
references
it's
vending
not. Yeah,
machines in Tress, and I was like,
maybe
this is
this is
so
what I was
weird.
thinking of. If you prefer, a little success is the metaphoric bang on the front of the mental vending machine that jostles loose the stuck ideas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
weird. Maybe that. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
but yeah, I think there was something else that he referenced too that read to me. It's when he was talking. I want to say it's when he was talking about her computer that I was like, he's talking to somebody else who uses those. Um,
Mm.
So like he says, I know that sailors fear storms on your
oh right.
planet. Uh,
They're far more versatile than something running on a traditional computer program, but they're also not fully alive.
Oh, yes, like the speaking minds inhabiting the ships you've seen landing on your planet. So like this
Yeah.
is like space age Cosmere stuff happening. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously
I mean,
we see
and
the
it's
sorceress has a spaceship, so of course, but
Yeah.
but it also is not. It's not like, yeah, it's clearly something. It's clearly of a period where whoever he's talking to, they just have computers and vending machines
yeah.
and spaceships.
I was genuinely confused by all of the like the use of Earth terms,
Uh-huh.
because I feel like if you create a vending machine in a society that has never had a vending machine, you wouldn't call it a vending machine. You
Uh-huh.
know, like the
Yeah, but
likelihood that that would happen.
Well, I mean, it's all
So I was
translated
just like,
into
is this Earth
English,
stuff?
and it's all
But
translated into
yeah,
English into words that make sense to us.
connection.
and like I agree with you, but also why would they call a cannon a cannon? Why would they call
Mm-hmm.
why do they even call them spores?
Yeah.
Why isn't it some other word? Like I'm not saying that
It's
to
capital
just
C
be
connection,
argumentative
translating it
because
into words we can understand. It's all
I
investiture
agree
all the
with
way
you.
down.
It's something I've struggled with at times with various, like just jumping from Mistborn to Stormlight, because there's shared
Mm-hmm.
terms between the two of those worlds sometimes, and I'm kind of like, why is that?
Uh-huh.
They're not related. Like they don't know each
Mm.
other.
There is stuff where it's like, oh, this, just like as an author, why does he do this? Like in Warbreaker, it's a very small example. In Warbreaker, they mentioned something about shash. It's like a word or a character in their alphabet or
Yes.
something, and then Shash
Yeah.
is what is the brand on Kaladin's forehead. But he's like, oh yeah, no, they're not related. They're just separate things. Like, why did you make them the same thing?
Yeah, and
You're the
I'm
author.
willing to
Like you're able to make those two different things. There's no reason to do that.
But on the flip side, I'm fine with him doing that stuff because the Cosmere is already complex enough.
Sure.
I don't need also Neil Stevenson, like beds are
Mm.
called borlogs and
Sure.
horses are called fleaborps or whatever. Like that's
He could have just said, instead of Shash in Warbreaker, Fleaborp.
yes,
And it would have
in that
been
particular instance
completely,
it is a little
yes.
frustrating.
That's funny.
But I'm okay with a ship. I'm okay with a ship on Tress's world being a big boat and a ship on Roshar being a big boat. Like that's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
I
I
don't
mean,
mind that those two things are the same, even though they
but that's
wouldn't.
every fantasy
It is, yeah,
story.
totally.
And
Yes, absolutely.
they don't speak
Yeah,
English. They
it's just
speak
a
other weird languages, unless it's specifically said they speak English. But
yeah, it's all very interesting, and he has to deal with it on a larger, I guess, because he writes an interconnected universe with different planets. He has to deal with it in a way that is more I would assume challenging than other fantasy authors. Like other fantasy authors, you say it's a dragon, you don't go, well, why is it a dragon? Why does it look like that?
Yeah.
Why is it what? You just go, oh, they have dragons here. Whereas in the Cosmere, I'm like, well, where did that dragon come from? Why does it look
Brandon
like that?
says it's a chicken, you go, okay, wait, is it a chicken or is it a chicken?
Yes. Yeah.
But which is like
why
a
do
fun
they have
little joke about Roshar, and just like everything's a chicken, but also, okay, but is it a chicken or is it a chicken?
Well, and it's also like, wait, why do they have horses?
Yeah.
Everything else is different, and I only ask those questions because I know him, and he probably has an answer, and his answer might just be, don't ask that question.
I mean, but we know why they have horses, but and why they have like pigs and stuff. Like we know that
because they brought them with them. But like, where did those things...
But
no, right, but where did those things, why did they have them on the world they came from? Did they come from Earth?
I mean, no, because Earth doesn't exist in the Cosmere. They might have come from Yolen, which is the Earth equivalent. But maybe, perhaps, or
why
were
did
native to the
horses
planet
evolve
they're
on
from.
Yolen? I'm being I'm being difficult.
I mean, it's storytelling stuff.
I know,
and he could have gone like full out, I'm going to make everything unique and custom, but he's like, I mean, you got to have dogs somewhere. Like you can't not have dogs. Well, that's why did Tolkien have horses and and shit like that? Like
because that takes place in Europe on Earth.
True. This is true. Middle Earth.
Well,
Europe's in the middle.
Yeah, exactly. Sam gets it. He's from there.
Speaking of wrapping things up, so I think with that the Cosmere stuff in this is minor, but the minor stuff is really interesting. If that makes sense to you guys?
Yeah.
It feels major to me, but in the sense that it's going to become minor in 10 years when we have books. When we have the book about the future Roshar where they just have computers and spaceships, we're gonna go, I get, it's cute that back in Tress he showed this.
They had a penis rocket.
I mean, it's a nice little. I mean, kind of it's a preview for like Aether stuff, which hasn't. Lost Metal has some stuff, but also it doesn't really tell us anything other than there's like weird nature stuff going on because of the Aethers, but so like that stuff is, I want to know more. Again, they've been teased, but we still don't know really anything about them, and I'm curious when are they going to become more involved in the story. But so there, I think there's a lot of great little teases about what's to come. But there isn't anything where I'm like, ooh, I'm very excited to see what this is about or something like that. Just very Like, okay, there's more stuff here, more stuff to see what's going on. Like in the future, things are going to be technology is going to go in this direction, which I already knew from like reading Words of Brandon and stuff. But it is nice to see a little bit more of what the direction overall is.
Mm.
I'm very much looking forward to seeing how, for example, someone on in a Mistborn era where they have computers, how does what's the character like? What does a hacker look like?
Yeah.
In Mistborn, what is
Mm.
what there's just a lot
Are
of
they going to be
cool
burning metals to like interface with a computer or something? Like,
and
what
is
does
that
that look
like
like?
is there going to be like the way they when they take the spice in Dune to fly ships around like
Yeah.
what is that? Is there going to be a metal equivalent of that kind of anyway?
Yeah.
This stuff is I could hypothesize about that stuff all day long, and that's part of why I thought that ending stuff was cool in Tress, because it's a little peek at that.
I think, speaking of hypothesizing all day long, unfortunately, I can't because I need to go to bed because it's quite late here.
It's fair.
But if you guys are interested in keeping up with Andre and Pat, they'll probably be back on the channel at some point. And I'll pop their Twitter handles in the description for the video to save everyone from running through it all and spelling it all out. And as always, if you like this video, give it a like. If you didn't like this video and you want to engage with us or chat with us about our Cosmere opinions, drop a comment and I will reply to those comments and maybe send them to Andre and Pat if they get anything directed at them specifically.
And smash that subscribe button.
Yeah, please do subscribe. Please do like the channel, and there'll be more full spoiler discussions for Cosmere books, possibly for Yumi when Pat finishes it. We may reconvene the team.
Mm-hmm.
So thanks very much for watching, and I will speak to you soon.